5:47 a.m. The coffee was cold, last night's cup still sitting on the kitchen table, a graveyard of good intentions. I hadn't slept. Again. My phone screen glowed in the dim light, a bank notification burning into my retinas, negative balance. Right below it, the third rejection email this month. Third. Like a holy trinity of disappointment. The subject line read, "We regret to inform you," and I almost laughed. Almost. But the sound got stuck somewhere between my throat and the lump that's been living there for weeks. I stared at the screen until my eyes blurred. The kitchen was silent except for the wall clock, tick, 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 each second a tiny hammer nailing down the reality I didn't want to face. A new month had started, and I had nothing. No job. No cushion. No plan B. Just this cold coffee, this empty room, and a God who felt further away than the stars I couldn't see through the window. You need to understand something about me. I'm not a pastor. I'm not a worship leader. I'm not the person who stands on stage with perfect hair and a microphone, telling you that breakthrough is just around the corner. I'm the person who's been awake at 3 a.m. more times than I can count, staring at the ceiling, whispering questions I was too ashamed to say out loud in church. Questions like, do you actually hear me? Have I done something wrong? Is there some secret sin blocking my blessings, or am I just invisible up there? Last year, I sat in a hospital parking lot at midnight. My mom had just received a diagnosis that cracked our family right down the middle. I remember the way the fluorescent lights in that lot buzzed, that ugly orange hum, while I gripped the steering wheel and sobbed like a child. I had prayed. I had fasted. I had done everything I knew to do. And still, the answer was silence. The kind of silence that makes your faith feel like a joke you're telling yourself. That same silence filled my kitchen at 5:47 a.m. The morning light crept through old curtains, weak and gray, barely strong enough to reveal the dust on the furniture. I hadn't cleaned in days. I hadn't done much of anything except apply for jobs, check my phone, and replay every mistake I'd ever made. The air felt thick, like the room itself was holding its breath. I could hear my own breathing, shallow, tired, and the occasional sigh that escaped without permission. And then the questions started bubbling up, unbidden, the way they always do when you're alone and broke and scared. God, do you see me right now? Because it really doesn't feel like it. Did I mess up somewhere? Did I miss a turn? Because I've been trying so hard, and every door keeps slamming in my face. Where's the miracle? Where's the provision? Where's the breakthrough everyone keeps singing about? Maybe you know that place. Maybe you've been there, sitting in your own kitchen, or your car, or your empty apartment, asking the same things. Maybe you've scrolled past worship songs on social media because they felt like a foreign language. Maybe you've nodded along in a church service while inside you were screaming, I don't believe any of this right now. If that's you, I see you. I am you. That moment in my kitchen wasn't the first time I doubted, and it probably won't be the last. But it was the moment something started to shift, even though I didn't realize it yet. Here's what I'm not going to do. I'm not going to preach at you. I'm not going to wrap this up in a neat little bow and tell you that everything changed overnight because I just believed harder. That's a lie, and I've heard it too many times from people who've never tasted cold coffee at dawn with nothing but rejection letters for company. What I will tell you is the truth. Sometimes faith doesn't look like a shout on a mountaintop. Sometimes it's a whisper so weak you're not even sure it counts as prayer. Sometimes it's just sitting there, in the silence, and not walking away. I remember looking down at my phone again, that negative number still glowing, and something broke open inside me. Not a breakthrough. Not a miracle. Just a crack. A tiny fissure where a question slipped through, a question I hadn't asked before. It wasn't "Why is this happening?" or "When will you fix it?" It was quieter than that. Smaller. Almost dangerous. What I discovered at 5:47 a.m. changed everything I thought I knew about surrender. But at 5:47 a.m., with cold coffee and a negative bank balance, God whispered something that shattered that whole framework. Surrender isn't letting go. It's grabbing his hand so tight your knuckles turn white, and letting him lead you through the fire instead of around it. My wife had sent a text right before the sermon started. Something about our son's tuition payment being overdue. Again. The pastor preached about God's provision. I nodded along. I even managed a weak smile when the person next to me glanced over. But inside, I was screaming. Where? Where is the provision? Because I've been praying for 3 months, and the bills are still piling up on my kitchen table, and my son still needs things I can't give him, and I'm so tired of pretending that everything is fine when it's not. That's the mirror moment. Maybe you've been there. Maybe you know what it feels like to nod along to a sermon about God's faithfulness while your stomach is in knots over a bill you can't pay. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not the kind of restlessness where you toss and turn for an hour and then drift off. The kind where the ceiling becomes a screen, and your mind projects every failure, every fear, every worst-case scenario onto it until 3 a.m. feels like noon and 4 a.m. feels like Judgment Day. I had prayed. I had really prayed, the desperate, wordless kind of prayer that's more groaning than language. And still, the ceiling felt closed. Like my words were hitting plaster and falling back down on my face. Anybody ever been there? You're praying, but it feels like you're just talking to yourself in a dark room. And the silence is so loud it almost mocks you. Somewhere around 3:30 in the morning, I did something I hadn't done in a long time. I opened my Bible. Not because I was feeling spiritual. Not because I wanted to. But because I had run out of options. When you've exhausted every human strategy, when you've called every contact, applied for every job, and still come up empty, you start reaching for things you used to believe in. So I opened that book, and my eyes landed on a verse I had probably read 20 times before. Proverbs 16 verse 3. Commit your works to the Lord, and your plans will be established. And I remember thinking, really, God? That's it? Commit my works. I've been committing. I've been praying. I've been trusting. I've been doing all the things. And nothing is established. Nothing is working. The bills are still on the table. The tuition is still overdue. My son still needs things I can't provide. So what am I missing? What part of commit don't I understand? That's when it hit me. I had been committing my problems to God like I was handing him a to-do list. Here, fix this. Here, pay this. Here, open this door. Here, make this go away. But I hadn't committed myself. I hadn't surrendered the one thing I was still clinging to, my need to control the outcome. I wanted God to change my circumstances. What I didn't want was for God to change me. And there it is. The memorable truth that rewired everything. Real surrender doesn't start with God changing your situation. It starts with God changing the way you see your situation. I wanted a miracle. God wanted my heart. I wanted provision. God wanted my trust. I wanted the pressure to stop. God wanted to teach me how to stand under pressure without breaking. And I'll be honest, I didn't like that at first. It felt like a cop-out. It felt like one of those spiritual cliches people throw at you when they don't have real answers. Maybe God is teaching you something. I hated that phrase. Still do, sometimes. But there in the dark, at 3:30 a.m., I couldn't escape the truth of it. Because here's what I realized, if God had answered my prayers the way I wanted him to, if he had just swooped in and fixed everything overnight, I would have learned nothing. I would have walked away with a paid bill and the same shallow faith I had before. I would have missed the deeper work he was doing underneath the surface. The kind of work that can only happen when you're desperate. The kind of transformation that requires the fire. I thought surrender was passive. I thought it meant doing nothing while God did everything. But that's not surrender. That's laziness dressed up in spiritual language. Real surrender is active. It's waking up every morning and choosing to trust when everything in you wants to panic. It's paying the bill you can pay, even if it's the smallest one, and trusting God to handle the rest. It's looking your son in the eye and saying, I don't know how we're going to do this, but I know who is with us. It's crying in the back row of church and still showing up the next Sunday. Not because you feel strong, but because you're learning that strength isn't the point. Dependence is. The hardest thing to surrender wasn't my problems, it was my timeline. I had a calendar in my head, and God wasn't following it. I wanted the breakthrough by Tuesday. I wanted the provision by the end of the month. I wanted the pressure to lift before I had to have another uncomfortable conversation with my wife, before my son asked another question I couldn't answer, before I had to swallow my pride one more time. But God doesn't work on our schedules. And that's not cruelty. That's mercy. Because if he gave us what we wanted when we wanted it, we'd stay spiritual infants forever, never learning to walk by faith when the path is dark. So here's the question I'm still wrestling with, and maybe you need to wrestle with it too. If surrender isn't about giving God your problems, but about giving God your heart, what are you still holding back? What timeline are you clutching so tightly that your fingers are going numb? What outcome are you demanding that God never promised? Because I'm learning that the deepest surrender isn't about finances or health or circumstances. It's about something far more terrifying to release. And that's when I realized. There was one thing I still hadn't surrendered. I wanted God to act on my schedule. I wanted the answer by Friday, the miracle before the end of the month, peace right now. But God whispered something that wrecked me, your calendar is not my calendar. And honestly, that made me angry at first. Because who has time to wait when the bank account is negative? Who has patience when your son is watching you, learning what faith looks like by watching his father barely hold it together? I wanted the rescue. I wanted the breakthrough. I wanted God to show up like a superhero and fix everything before I had to explain to my wife why we were eating rice and beans again. But here's what I'm learning, and I'm still learning it, still fighting it most days. The waiting isn't punishment. It's preparation. God isn't withholding because he's cruel. He's working because he's a father. And a good father doesn't give his child everything they want the moment they want it. He builds character. He deepens roots. He teaches trust that can't be learned when everything comes easy. Psalm 37 verse 5 says it this way, commit your way to the Lord, trust in him, and he will act. I used to read that verse like a contract. I'd commit my way, meaning I'd tell God my plan, and then he'd act, meaning he'd make my plan happen. That's not faith. That's gaslighting yourself with Bible verses while still demanding to be in control. What if he will act doesn't mean he'll do what I want? What if it means he'll do what he knows is best? And what if his best looks nothing like my plan, but everything like my transformation? Mirror moment, think about the last time you felt God's presence, not when everything was perfect, but right in the middle of the mess. Where were you? What was breaking? And somehow, you knew you weren't alone. I remember last year. Hospital parking lot. 11:47 p.m. I was sitting in my car with tears hitting the steering wheel, making these little splashing sounds in the silence. My wife was upstairs with our son. Tests were inconclusive. Bills were piling up. And I had nothing left. No prayer. No faith. No strength. Just a man in a cold car with cold coffee from that morning still in the cup holder, completely empty. And then, I can't explain this theologically. I can't put it in a sermon outline. But something shifted. Not the circumstances. The hospital didn't disappear. The bills didn't vanish. My son wasn't suddenly healed. But a peace that made 0 sense wrapped around me like a blanket. I didn't hear a voice. I didn't see a vision. I just knew, deeper than knowing, that I was not alone. That's the thing about God's presence. It doesn't always change what's happening around you. It changes what's happening inside you. The storm keeps raging, but you stop drowning. Memorable truth: faith isn't knowing what God will do. It's knowing God will be with you no matter what He does. And maybe that's where you are right now. Sitting in your own version of that parking lot. Staring at your own steering wheel. Wondering if God sees you, if He hears you, if any of this praying and trusting is actually making a difference. Let me tell you what I wish someone had told me that night. Surrender isn't giving up. It's giving over. It's taking your white-knuckled grip off the steering wheel of your life and saying, I don't know where we're going, but I know who's driving. So here's what I want you to do. Right now. Pause the video if you need to. Put your hand on your chest. Feel your heartbeat. That's proof you're still here. That's proof God isn't finished with you yet. And I want you to whisper this, not as a magic spell, not as a formula, but as a surrender: this month belongs to God. Not the stack of bills on my kitchen counter that I keep turning face down so I don't have to look at them. Not the phone call from the doctor I've been dreading. Not the silence from someone I love who still won't speak to me. This month belongs to God. And I know I've said it before. Maybe you have too, whispered it like a wish, then watched the week unravel anyway. So today, let's do something different. Right now, I'm taking that one bill I'm most afraid of and laying my hand on it. I'm not ignoring it. I'm giving it to Him. And if you need to, write it on your bathroom mirror: God, this is yours too. Let me pray for you. Lord, I come to you not as someone strong, but as someone tired of pretending I'm not scared. I don't know how the numbers will add up, how the healing will finally show up, or when the phone will ring with good news. But you know. And somehow, that's enough to take the next breath. I surrender this month to you, not just the big unknowns, but the little moments too. The 2 a.m. worries. The envelope I'm afraid to open. The conversation I keep rehearsing. Take it. Take all of it. Because if it's in my hands, I'll crush it. In yours, it has room to breathe. Amen. You, not just what I want, but who I am. My fears. My doubts. My timeline. My demands. My desperate need to control what I was never meant to control. Take it all. Give me peace that doesn't make sense. Give me faith to wait when everything in me wants to rush. Give me courage to take the next step even when I can't see the whole path. And give me love, real love, for the people around me, even when I'm hurting. I declare that this month belongs to you. Not because I said it, but because you are the God of this month and the God of my life. And nothing, not bills, not sickness, not fear, not failure, can snatch me out of your hands. In Jesus' name, amen. Look at that cup of cold coffee now. It's still cold. The circumstances haven't magically changed. But something has shifted. That cup isn't a symbol of failure anymore. It's an altar of surrender. It's the place where I stopped pretending I could hold it all together and started letting God hold me. If you're still watching, I want to invite you to do something. Not for me, for you. In the comments, write these words: "This month belongs to God." Don't write it to impress anyone. Write it as a reminder to yourself. Write it as an act of faith. Write it because sometimes your fingers need to declare what your heart is still learning to believe. Maybe you woke up this morning with that familiar tightness in your chest, the kind that settled in somewhere between the muffled sobs into your pillow at 2 a.m. and the trembling hand that reached for the coffee pot, afraid of what another day might ask of you. But hear this gentle truth: you can lay your head down tonight with peace. Not because the weight magically lifted, not because the unanswered questions suddenly made sense, but because you were never meant to carry any of it alone. His shoulder has been beside yours this whole time, bearing the part you couldn't see. This month belongs to God, and so do you, even in the unraveling, even in the waiting. May the Lord bless you and keep you in the moments when holding yourself together feels impossible, like that cold cup of coffee you forgot on the counter, a small witness to your exhaustion, yet a reminder that His provision never cools. May He make His face shine upon you, especially when all you can see is the shadow stretching across the kitchen floor, and may His light be the steady tick of the wall clock, marking not your frantic rush but His unhurried grace that holds every second. And may He give you peace, the kind that doesn't make logical sense, the kind that stitches you back together at the seams when everything around you is fraying, the kind that settles in the quiet spaces between your heartbeats, whispering you are not forgotten. So walk forward, not as someone who has it all figured out, but as someone who is deeply, completely, unconditionally loved, wrapped in the same mercy that carried you through the unraveling, through the waiting, and into this moment where you are still held.